Welcome to Twice the Terror. I'm Ryan.
And I'm allegedly Kat.
We don't know. The government has kind of disclosed this information. It's a lot of those like images that you see of like the documents where it's, black marker through it and then it just says
redacted.
Yeah, it's just redacted.
Just like 3 words on the whole page. The rest of it's just marker.
But yes, Twice the Terror with twice your hosts, twice a month, bringing you all things spooky, scary, and skeleton-y. Kat, what are we talking about this episode?
I don't know because you didn't tell me.
That's right. I actually kept this one a surprise. So this is something that I've never told this story publicly. I have a ghost story that I've told friends before, but I've never told it on this show. And I've had several ghost encounters. We haven't talked in too much detail about them. I think the only one I've really talked about was not my story, but it was Shannon's story. This is a story that happened to me back in college, and I think it's such a good story that I want to lean into it and talk about it. Now, it does also involve a friend of mine from college, but I'm gonna just leave his name out of it. We'll just call him Friend. For the
I don't like it. Let's call him Scruffy.
Scruffy. Okay, his name is Scruffy. Scruffy the janitor. And there's a little personal detail he says later on that I'm going to leave out too, just for, his sake. I didn't, but this is a story that happened to me as well. So that's kind of why I feel okay telling it. And we're not talking about him or anything. So I think it's okay.
That's not true. Ryan's going to read you Scruffy's social security number at the end of this episode.
That's it. But this particular story involves something that happened to me way back in college, way back in the year of 2013. I believe it was 2013. Which, I make a joke, but really that was already 11 years ago. Now, I went to college in Idaho. As many people know on this podcast, I'm originally from California, did a lot of community college stuff there. And then after that, I transferred to get a theater degree at the University of Idaho. Now, that was their school motto, by the way.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was Idaho, Udaho. That is not true at all. But
yes, it is. Who would lie on the internet?
Yeah, right. The internet's full of truth. That's if we know anything about the internet, it's true. But this story is true. So there was a group of us. The cool thing about being a theater kid, if you have a good theater group, a group of people who love doing theater, they'll do projects outside of the school too. Like you'll just throw together a project because you want to. And so of course you're working on stuff in classwork and you're working on, the productions put on by the school, but you also are like, hey, let's put on a show. That's the great thing about getting theater kids together. They'll all put on a show, like the Little Rascals. We're all just like, let's put on a show, gang. And there was a group of us that really loved horror. And there's not a lot of horror theater out there. You got to select a few, but there's not a lot to really dig into. So we decided that what we were going to do was we were going to adapt stories, which are technically from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the book we've talked about before, of course, that many people know for the terrifying imagery. But a lot of those stories are also based on folklore. So we were like, okay, so we're not exactly adapting those stories. We're taking these folklore ideas and we're adapting our own stories. And we also made it a free event. Basically, the way that we paid for it, or we didn't pay for it, but the way that we charged people was it was a food donation. So anything we made off of that, if it was any money or if it was mostly canned goods, it went to our local like food bank and stuff. So the show was basically free. And so what we did was we made a horror anthology. We divided it amongst people. You had different stories. You could pick from whatever you wanted of any of the books or anything. And then basically you took the basic concept and you wrote a script and you adapted it into a story. And that's a cool enough project. But the best part about it was we did it at a little place called the Cordelia Lutheran Church. Now, Kat, I'm going to send you a link really quick so you can take a look at what this church looks like.
I love a picture book. Picture story. The Cordelia, the idea, what the fuck?
So for anybody not watching, I'll put this video, as long as I can credit this photo, I'll put it up in the video.
This looks like the background of an Ethel Cain music video. What tarnation? But what in the pilgrim hunting nonsense am I looking at?
So this was a church in the middle of nowhere. So where University of Idaho is at in Moscow, Idaho, which is already in the middle of nowhere. Moscow, Idaho bordered Washington, like 15-minute drive, you're in Washington state. And so there was another college town right there you could go to. Other than that, you're driving hours to get to any cities. Like, it's not like close to anything. It's this cool little college town, but that's it. That's all that's there. On the outskirts, there's nothing. This church was on the like the outskirts. I think it was like 20 or 30 minutes outside the city, maybe a little longer. But basically, you drove in the middle of nowhere. You then had to turn onto a dirt road and find where this old church was in the middle
And
of nowhere.
along the way, there's a harbinger standing along the road in a straw hat with no teeth, being like, "Danger, here."
Dude, you aren't kidding, because there are many times with stuff like that where you're driving and like I ended up there a couple times to shoot other projects, like film projects and stuff that weren't this.
Yeah.
And
Eye-watering.
Basically they had one time I pulled up and they had like, I don't know what they were doing, because this is like a historical place. Like it's taken care of by like a historical society, you know, but it's not like they, as far as I know, they don't hold service there or anything. Like sometimes they do weddings and things like that, but it's literally, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. What I was going to say is they had like midsummer style decorations out one time. And I was like, this is like really cool, but like also like what? Obviously it was before the film Midsummer, but that style of like, you know, pagan likes. And I'm like, I'm very confused because it's like a Lutheran church, but then they have this like weird like stuff up.
I caught a little bit in the Wikipedia article, and it says that it was mainly created for the local Swedish families, which totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Also, as someone who's married into a Swedish Lutheran family, I mean this with full respect, they are creepy. They're creepy people. When they have conversation, they sit in a circle and they all face each other and they take turns talking. I come from a family of Irish and Eastern Europeans. Everyone's screaming. Everyone is screaming over each other. These people terrify me. Anyways.
So interesting thing about this place is, like I said, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. Like if you Google Maps this place, like you're driving in the middle of nowhere. And it might have changed. And before I say this, if anybody is out there, if you're going to go explore this place, please be very respectful. We did this show there, and we'll get to that. And there was somebody whose show had some glitter. They didn't even have glitter in the show. It just like it was in a container somebody was carrying, and a little bit got on the floor. And they were actually kind of upset with us that like that happened, and they didn't really want us doing the show there next year, which is a bummer. We had to find a different venue, and that's a shame. But it is that thing of like, you know, they take care of this place. Like I don't fault them for that at all.
Yeah.
Because
glitter's a bitch to clean up.
Yeah, and it's a historical place. So please, if anybody's out in that area, please go and respect this place. It is very cool. It's near and dear to my heart in terms of just like a cool venue and spot. But just be very respectful if you go check it out. But what I was going to say is, at the time, there were no locks on this place. So we drove out there in the middle of the night sometimes just to check it out. And I shot like films there and things like that, that you could just go in. And it's creepy. It is a little one-room church. It's got like pews in it. There's a little tiny stage. It holds maybe like 50 people max if you were getting everybody jam-packed in there. There's no AC. Tiny. There's no heat. There is no electricity.
See, this is what was okay. If you watched our first episode with my friend Iggy, we were talking about black horror. This is what Iggy meant by like black people don't put themselves in these situations. Only white people. Anyways, yeah. So
and on top of that, there's a little tiny graveyard out in the back too. Like
cute.
Yeah. And so it's this awesome venue. I don't even remember how we found it. But basically we found it and we came up with these stories and we had different people directing. And I was directing and writing. I directed and wrote a story. Some other people I know were in stories, and some other people like I know directed stories. I don't remember how many we had total. I wish I remembered, but it was really cool. And the whole thing, you would go in. We did the show at night, so you would drive out in the middle of nowhere. You'd have to find this place. You get there, and any music we played was just ambiance music, like stuff from like a speaker somebody had. And the only thing that lit this place was we bought a ton of those artificial candles. So the ones that were like battery powered, and we just lined the stage with those. And the way that you ended a scene and started a scene was we had one person working in the back with a remote, and they would just pan across with the remote and turn off all the candles. And so this place would go pitch black. It was amazing. It was the perfect setting for like horror anthology plays, right? Because the stage was so small, you couldn't craft like elaborate things. You had to be scary in the right ways. And so it was perfect. It was the perfect venue. The show turned out great. We did a couple nights of it. One of my favorite shows we ever did. I still love that show. I love the fact that I was actually just talking to one of my friends. Shout out to my friend Danny. I was talking to her the other day, and I mentioned this again. She was like, yes, I would love to do something like that again. And same with me. I love horror. I love horror theater. And this thing was just really cool. So that's a long-winded way to say we did it all around the time of Halloween. So it was perfect, right? People go out, they drive in the middle of nowhere, give a can of beans or whatever, and then they get to see a spooky horror anthology in a creepy church in the middle of nowhere with no lights. By the way, what we had for the actors, because there was only one entrance in and out of this place, as you can see in the photo. That was your entrance and exit, and there was a tent in the back, like a little, like we'd set up like a little gazebo with like some like I don't even remember if we had warmers. I think we did. I think somebody brought out some sort of like little space heater thing. And that was it. The actors were just huddled in the back, and it was like when it was your scene, you went up and you did your scene, and then lights went out, you left, and then the next scene started. So it was nothing like it. Very, very cool. But we didn't do it on Halloween. So what a group of us who worked on the show decided was that's how we were going to spend our Halloween that year, was we were going to go out to the Cordelia, just a few of us. I think it was maybe 10 of us, those who wanted to go out, who worked on the show, who decided they wanted to go out. Because I think Halloween was on like a Tuesday that year. So we went out late on Halloween, and we all hung out in this church with no lights, no electricity, no nothing. And we either read stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, or we told ghost stories, or we told our own stories, and we did all that. So bunch of us went. One of them was my friend Scruffy, as we've called him
Scruffy.
now. So Scruffy went out with us. He had also worked on the show. He was actually in my show. And then a couple other people who worked on the show. And then it was the people like kind of like who spearheaded it. It was me, and without giving another name, we'll call this guy
Jethro.
Okay, so it was me and Jethro who really spearheaded this, kind of because we were both big horror people and we wanted to do this, and then we pulled other people in, but we kind of were like, great, let's get people out there, let's do this. So we're out there, right, and we're sitting there in the dark. People are come up and telling stories. And this place, like I said, you get like 50 people in there, it's creepy enough. You get like 10 people in there, and it's creepy and it's silent. It's middle of nowhere, and it's Halloween night, right? And you're telling stories. And so we're all sitting there and we're telling spooky stories, and occasionally you'd hear something. So
Right, baby Lane.
Not quite, but you would hear shit where, again, it's an old wooden church, right? So you don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I remember distinctly, we'd be sitting there, and me and Jethro and some other people had actually gone to theaters and done some ghost hunting. So we had, because Jethro had access to other like theaters for like not only the ones at our school but other schools. So we would go and we would just sit there and we'd go ghost hunting and like go to these theaters, because if you know anything about theaters, they're fucking haunted. Doesn't matter if it's attached to a school. So anyway, well, we're at Cordelia. We're sitting around this church. We're telling ghost stories. And occasionally I'd look at Jethro and we'd hear stuff. You'd start hearing like, I don't know if you can hear that, but you'd start hearing like footstep sounds. Or you start hearing creaking of things where you're like, that was weird. Okay. And so you're listening, right? Because anybody who's done any paranormal investigation, or even if you don't believe in ghosts and you've done this, you know what you do most of the time is sit and listen. You're trying to hear things, and you're trying to decide, okay, was that the wind? Was it the floorboard creaking? Or was it something else? And so occasionally you'd hear stuff like that. You'd hear and we'd look at each other and be like, was that Was that footsteps? So somebody'd be up on stage, telling a story, and then you'd look across the pew because you'd hear maybe a muffled voice, or you'd hear something, and you had to think about it. Like, okay, there's maybe a farmer way down the road, but is their voice traveling all the way here on a Tuesday night at 11 or 10 o'clock at night or whatever it was, like in the middle of the dark? So you start to hear this stuff, and it's getting a little weird, and people start freaking themselves out. Like, if you're into ghost stuff, some people, you just like, they're not expecting that. Me, I'm like enthralled. I'm like, oh, that's weird, that's creepy, I'm hearing stuff. And so we're telling stories and everything, and at one point we take a break, and we go outside, and again, this is 11 years ago, so forgive me if my memory's a little fuzzy. But we went outside, and everyone's having a good time. We're all chatting and everything, and everyone's hanging out. I think people wanted to go have a smoke break or, whatever and stuff. And so we were like, all right, do we all want to go back in? Yeah, okay. And remember, like, there's like 10 of us. So this little like pew area, you're each kind of getting your own pew. You can, and so there's not a lot of us kind of in there. So you're kind of sitting in your own space. So we walk back in, and immediately it just feels different. The air feels weird. And I know to some people who don't believe in this, that's going to sound really vague. They're going to feel like, really, the air was different. But you just kind of know. If you walk into somewhere haunted or maybe haunted, and suddenly it feels different, there's, it's almost like when you walk into a room. This is a good example that people say all the time, which is like, if you walk into a room and people have just had an argument, and you may not have heard it,
but feel that energy, like that. Just
yes.
Yeah.
And so that's it was this weird feeling of like, man, this room feels different now. So we get back to it, and we're telling ghost stories. And I start feeling like heaviness on me. Like, no other way to describe it other than just like, I'm feeling something weighing down on me. Now, I'm probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 pews back. Scruffy's behind me by, I think, about a pew. I think. He may have been, no, I think he was behind me. And then I've got a few friends up front, and then a few over on the other side as well. But I start to feel just this heaviness. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, God, this feels weird. Like, I'm feeling down and weighed down and heavy and just awful. And it's just like, I don't know what this is. This gross feeling. I don't know what this is. So I'm sitting there, and one of my friends up front notices it. And she goes, Ryan, why don't you come sit up here with us? I was like, okay, all right. So I kind of get out of there, and so I'm sitting there with them, and all of a sudden, because I'm like in this group, it lifts a little bit. You suddenly feel a little better. And I'm like, okay, but you kind of still feeling the air feels weird. And so people are telling stories, and some people are starting to freak out because you're hearing more noises. And the later it gets, sometimes you're like, okay, my ear's playing tricks on me or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And so people are starting to get a little bit more scared, but we're still telling stories. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay. And I turned back to Scruffy, and I'm like, Scruffy, why don't you come sit up here with us? You can come sit up. And he's like, no, I'm good. And Scruffy is like, he's sitting in a pew. If I remember correctly, I look back because I remember he's sitting in a pew. There's like an aisle that runs all the way up the church. And so you got pews on one side, pews on the other. And he's like sitting close to the aisle. And he's sitting there. And he's kind of huddled like this. If you're not on video, you're kind of like holding himself. And he's looking down. And I'm like, dude, just come sit with us. Like, and he's like, no, I'm good. I'm okay. And I was like, okay, are you sure? And he's like, I'm fine. I was like, okay. So I leave it be. And like I said, you can kind of just feel the air is weird, and it's just different. And eventually, I don't remember what. I wish I remembered what exactly, but something scared a couple people there. Like, something legitimately made people like yelp, like scream almost. Like, something freaked. It was a noise or something freaked them out. And they're like, okay, we want to go. We're gonna go. And we were like, okay, you sure? And like, yeah, we're done. We don't want to be here anymore. And Scruffy jumps up. He's like, yeah, I'm going to. And I was like, and we were roommates. We lived in the same apartment. It was me, him, and another guy, and we all just like shared this like 3-bedroom apartment. And I was like, are you sure, man? Like, I'm gonna stick around. I can drive you home. He's like, I'm good. I was like, okay, as long as you're good, man. Like, he's like, yeah, okay. So a bunch of people kind of file out, and they leave. And so the rest of us kind of stick around, and we tell stories, and we're all hanging out, by lantern light. I think Jethro had brought like a little mini lantern, and that was our light for that night. And when you told the story, if I remember correctly, you're holding the lantern as you're telling it and stuff, right? So So we finished kind of wrapping up and everything, and people are kind of like sensing stuff, and it's getting weird. And so we're getting ready to go, and this information was either told to me as we were leaving or in the middle of that break. But if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it was after we were getting ready to leave. And we're all talking outside a little bit and stuff. And what my friend, who was sitting up in the front pew, and another like her roommate, what they said was, yeah, we got here early, and it's Halloween, so it's Samhain. And so we went out to the little graveyard, and we kind of did a little little ritual, and we told them, like, hey, if anybody wants to come join us, we're going to be telling some fun stories, and we're going to be telling some spooky stories, so you are welcome to come in, say hi, come join us, everything like that. And so obviously that seemed to stir up some activity, which is not a bad thing. Like, there's nothing, but if the thing about that sort of stuff is, if you're going to invite in the spirits that are in the back, you're also going to invite in totally fine people. You might invite in some less than...
Listen, if you add a +1,
yeah,
don't be surprised.
you might invite some less than stellar folks in. It's par for the course. It's kind of what happens. And so it's like that.
I gotta put on my scary movie blanket now that we're getting into the goods of the story.
So that explained a lot. Suddenly it was like they had done this little ritual. We had closed ourselves in, and I didn't know about this, and it wasn't like I was mad or anything. I was like, okay, cool, yeah.
But it's typically cool, like, tell people,
yeah,
general.
You kind of want to let people know with that sort of stuff. But obviously, if we're out there and people are having a smoke break and the door's wide open, obviously stuff's gonna come in. Like, you told them to come in, stuff's coming in. Which explains why the air felt so different, right?
Yeah.
And so it's late at night, and I think it was really late at night. I want to say it was around 1 or 2 when we finally left. It may not have been, but I feel like it was pretty late. So
just to get out before 3. 3 is usually when shit gets weird.
Yeah. So I jump in my I had like a Toyota like 4x4, some truck I like used thing that I would never drive in my regular life, but like was like a hand-me-down, like, you need a new car, here's this. So I was like, okay, great. So we got that, and so I'm driving home, and again, I'm by myself, and I'm driving this thing, and you're down on this dirt road. It's Halloween night, and you just had all this weird shit, right? So you're just kind of like on edge. So I'm sitting there, and it's just like dark, and you're driving home. I finally get home. I'm like, okay, comfort of my own home, like away from whatever that was. And I open the door, unlock the door, and Scruffy's still up. Scruffy's sitting in the living room, he's watching TV. And I was like, hey, man, how's it going? He's like, oh, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. So I asked him, I go, are you okay? Like, what happened that made you, like, jump up back there? And he goes, everything was fine until we came back in. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically was like, everything was fine until we came back in. And I was sitting there, and suddenly something started grabbing my leg, like, hard. And I'm like, bullshit, man, come on. Like, I'm like, I thought he's pulling my leg or something like that. And he's like, no, I'm sitting there, and I feel like something has a grip on my leg, and it won't let go. And he's like, I couldn't move. I didn't want to move. I just was stuck there, and this thing is like gripping me tightly. And I was like, we could have come and joined us. He's like, I was so scared. I couldn't, he's like, I can't move. I've got this thing. And he had someone who had passed, I believe, in his life. I'm not going to say who again, but he said, like, I started thinking about them, and stuff. And he's like, and that kind of loosened it. It helped me. It's about as much as I'll say. But he was talking about that, and he goes, yeah. And finally, when people were getting ready to leave, I was like, I got to get out of here, and I got to leave. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And he goes, no, I don't think you get it. And he lifts up his pant leg, and there are grip marks, hand marks, bruised on his leg.
Bruh.
And I was like, you are kidding me. He's like, I swear that was not there. That is not inflicted by me. It's not something that happened before. That is what happened while I was sitting there.
When you started this story, and like, I had like that brief little like idea of what this church was. I thought you were gonna get some like this little Swedish ghost who was gonna be like, tala to svenska, like some sort of like dude, whatever. Not that. Not
Yeah.
expecting that.
So that is pretty much the story. Now, again, it's one of those things where skeptical people could be like, well, it could have been something he didn't notice or this or that. But
or maybe like, yeah, in his tension, he was gripping his own leg and he didn't realize or something. Like it's psychosomatic.
Yeah. But knowing this guy and knowing he wasn't one to like, I haven't spoken to him in years. Unfortunately, kind of lost touch. But like, he was not a guy to lie or do that sort of stuff. He was very much just kind of like, what you see, what you get, is what you get type of guy. He was very much just down to earth sort of dude. And for him to be like, for me to feel that something was off and notice it, and other people start to notice it, for him to have that happen tells me that something else was with us there. Now, again, this is not, don't go, looking for trouble at that place. It's not a bad place. It's a sweet little church. It's beautiful. Visit it, treat it with nothing but respect. Check it out. There's a lot of people that upkeep it, and it's worth going to see just for the coolness of it. It's one of those things that people have to be aware of is if you open, if things are opened up for good things, sometimes you're gonna get less. It's just what it is, And
I think Shannon needs to be on an episode where we could do like a PSA for all the baby witches and be like, hey honey, hey sweetie, here's how you do Samhain. So you don't have like a big Samhain blowout. You want to know who you're inviting to the party. You want to bring salt water. You want to remind people, hey, when I leave, you stay here.
Yep. I have enough of a weird experience and connection to that place that there's something there. There's something there at the old Cordelia church. Oh, and I didn't even mention, the show was called the Cordelia Collection. We did that because we thought it was the perfect way to encompass the church and tell a cool, scary story. So that's it. That's my ghost story. If anybody else has any stories, reach out to us. We'd love to hear some of the stories and tell some stories. If you want to, email us or things like that, reach out to us first. We're looking to maybe set something up for that if people have interest in it.
Yeah. If you want us to give your horror story, your personal ghost story, the audiobook narrator treatment with a little bit of background audio and some dramatic reading, please.
Way less rambly than how I normally do it. So if I have something to read off of, be able to do that.
Yes.
But for today's episode, I think that's going to wrap it up. So, Kat, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, I think I'm thoroughly spooked. Well, good night to everyone, and to everyone a good fright, and until next time.
Until next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.